We all know the story of the Titanic. It's this monumental tragedy, right? Frozen in time. But what if I told you its most important legacy isn't really the loss, but all the lives that have been saved since? Because, the sinking of this so-called unsinkable ship became the actual blueprint for the safety rules that protect every single person who travels by sea today. It's a crazy story of how a total catastrophe became the foundation for global safety.
So, the RMS Titanic, it was an absolute marvel of technology. I mean, the biggest ship the world had ever seen. The problem was, it sailed out into the Atlantic under a set of safety laws that were just dangerously out of date. They were really designed for ships from a completely different time.
And right here, you can see the huge disconnect. I mean, look at this. The British regulations were written way back in 1894, and they just hadn't caught up with this new generation of massive ocean liners. So you have a rule for a 10,000-ton ship being used for the Titanic, a ship that was more than 4 times that big. It was, well, a mathematical formula for absolute disaster.
And this chart, this is the direct result. What's so shocking is that the Titanic actually carried more lifeboats than the law said it had to. It had 20. But that number was totally meaningless. There was only enough space for 1,178 people, which is barely half of the 2,227 souls on that ship. Just think about that for a second. The ship was perfectly legal, but it was fatally under-equipped from the very start.
So you can see the stage was already set for a tragedy. But the sinking itself wasn't just about one single mistake. Oh no. It was a chain reaction, a whole series of specific warnings that were ignored and signals that were completely misunderstood on that freezing, dark night. All day on April 14th, the warnings just kept coming in. You had the Baltic, the Californian, and then crucially, the Mesaba. Its message warned of a massive ice field, like a minefield of icebergs, directly in the Titanic's path. But here's the thing. The wireless operators were so swamped sending telegrams for the passengers that this critical life-or-death warning never, ever made it to the captain on the bridge.
And check this out. This is from the actual U.S. Senate investigation that happened later. It recorded the exact message from the SS Californian. That was a ship so close by that it had actually stopped for the night because it was completely surrounded by ice. And they tried to warn the Titanic directly.
And this was the reply he got. "Shut up, I'm busy." Just minutes before hitting the iceberg, the Titanic's operator, Jack Phillips, was stressed out, trying to clear that backlog of passenger messages. When the Californian's warning came through, and it was loud because they were so close, it just interrupted him, so he basically told them to get off the line. It was the final tragic dismissed warning.
So after the collision, the Titanic starts firing off distress rockets, and the crew on the nearby Californian, they see them. But here's the problem. Back then, there was no universal standard for what different rockets meant. They figured they were maybe just company signals, like ships talking to each other, or even celebratory fireworks. And the one person who could have clarified everything, the Californian's wireless operator, he'd already shut down his radio and gone to bed after being told to shut up. And the result of this whole cascade of failures, from the outdated rules to the ignored warnings to the misunderstood signals, was just a catastrophic loss of life. Over 1,500 men, women, and children died in the freezing Atlantic.
As you can imagine, the news sent a massive shockwave across the entire globe. How could the most advanced, unsinkable ship in the world just sink on its very first voyage? The public was demanding answers, and so 2 huge government investigations were launched almost immediately, one in the US and another one back in Britain.
This document right here, this is really the beginning of the search for truth. And in a pretty wild move for a foreign ship, the U.S. Senate launched an inquiry right away, basically holding all the key witnesses in the country. They interviewed survivors, they interviewed experts, just relentlessly piecing together every single mistake that led to the disaster. They were determined to figure out how this could have possibly happened. And these inquiries, they did not pull any punches. The U.S. Senate was especially harsh when it came to the SS Californian and its captain. This quote from their final report, wow, it shows you just how strongly they condemned that ship for seeing the rockets and doing nothing.
But the goal wasn't just to point fingers and assign blame. It was to make sure this could never, ever happen again. This page from the report, just titled Recommendations, is honestly one of the most important documents in the history of sailing. It laid the entire groundwork for a complete overhaul of safety at sea.
And that overhaul came in the form of something called SOLAS.
It was a direct, global response to the Titanic disaster, specifically designed to turn all those painful lessons into a permanent legacy of safety.
So what is SOLAS? Well, it stands for the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, and it was totally revolutionary. I mean, for the very first time, all these different countries came together to create one single, legally binding set of rules for all passenger ships. And it was born directly from the wreckage of the Titanic.
And this table just lays it all out so perfectly. You can literally draw a straight line from every single failure on the Titanic to a specific fix created by SOLAS. Not enough lifeboats? Okay, problem solved. Now you need enough for 100% of people on board. Radio operator was off duty? Not anymore. A 24-hour radio watch is now mandatory. Rockets were misunderstood? Easy fix. Now red rockets mean one thing and one thing only: distress. Ice warnings ignored? Okay, we'll create the International Ice Patrol to track icebergs, and it's still run by the U.S. Coast Guard to this day.
So all of this brings us to today. Every time you get on a ferry, or a cruise ship, or really any large vessel, you are protected by this invisible shield of regulations. And that shield was forged in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic more than 100 years ago. I mean, the legacy of SOLAS is just immense. It's been updated a bunch over the years, sure, but its core ideas are the same. Today, it's been adopted by pretty much every seafaring nation on the planet, covering 99% of the world's ships. It is, without a doubt, the most important safety treaty in maritime history.
And that really is the ultimate legacy of the Titanic.
It's a story that started with such a catastrophic loss, but it ended with a global promise to keep people safe. It makes you think, doesn't it? We'll always remember the 1,500 people who died. But can we even begin to count the millions who have been saved by the lessons that were written in the ice?